Japan is not a place I can describe with words coming out of my mouth. It's intangible, sort of like trying to describe make-believe. But one thing I can easily describe is my experience with the Ricoh GRIIIx. So let's get into it. Now I've had this camera for a couple of years already, but haven't taken it as my solo piece of kit on a long journey thus far. Picking a camera for Japan was an incredibly tough decision, but ultimately I settled on the little Ricoh due to its size, because my hunch was we were going to be walking 10 hours a day, every day, and my hunch was right. So having a camera the size of a Japanese vending machine coffee was absolutely the correct decision. Never once did it feel like a burden to our mobility, which is an amazing feat, especially when you factor in that this is a APS-C 24 megapixel camera with IBIS and a 40mm f2.8 lens. Many of you are probably looking at this monstrosity up here and thinking to yourself, that does not look like a factory GR3X, and you'd be right. Apparently, dust can get into the sensor through means of the little mechanical bits of the lens, and removing that dust would require major surgery. So rather than trying to prove that theory, I just opted for the safe route and bought this cheap Amazon filter housing that fits like crap. So I taped it with electrical tape to keep it on and seal it. And I also added this $20 UV filter, which should in theory seal everything off. And I can safely say that I am dust free this far. And because it's such a bulky solution, it may no longer be pocketable for you, but it's a worthy trade-off for me. Because this camera, well, looks like it does, I find that people pay no attention to it whatsoever. And for travel/street photography, I like that. I think it also is due to the fact that this camera has no viewfinder, so you can't hold it up to your eye, because I swear doing that freaks the hell out of people. So with this camera, you can't even do that. I usually just pretend to look like a dumb, clueless tourist, which I am, hold it out all willy-nilly. And it's weird because within this technical limitation, something has happened. My confidence to shoot on the street has gone way up, and I find myself getting closer to my subjects and caring less about what my subject thinks, because I know in the back of my mind, they think I'm a stupid tourist, which I am, but not a photographer. Another first for the trip was that I edited all these photos in the hotel on Lightroom iOS on my iPad. Because the Ricoh only has one card slot, I would just back up to the iPad every day or two, and then I would just edit them in the evenings with a glass of sake. And this combo is an excellent 1-2 punch. Not the Ricoh and the sake, the Ricoh and the iPad, because you can essentially shoot, edit, and deliver quality photos in a setup that weighs less than a loaf of bread. And if space are a concern and weight, which almost always is on a holiday, this is a fantastic setup. Autofocus has came so far in the past decade or so. This camera, I think, outperforms my old Canon 5D Mark III. It's snappy, and the touch to focus thing is really slick with this setup in my opinion. In fact, that's pretty much all I ever did. If you're a fancy film street photographer, you're probably used to zone focusing anyways, which this camera can also do. But for us mortals, I think the AF system on here is plenty good for travel. I wouldn't really rely on the AI tracking, but that's what the fancy Sony bodies are for anyways, right? The battery in this thing is really tiny, and if you're coming from a professional body, you're gonna be disappointed. But for travel, for me, it's a non-issue, and I'll tell you why. Professional shoots require lots of photos to be taken, because blasting through 10 frames of the same picture is indeed how you end up with the perfect shot. But for travel, I find myself shooting for memories. And memories themselves are imperfect, poetically flawed. Therefore, I'm not seeking perfection in my travel photography, rather a collection of color and light that I can remember my trip by. In fact, most days I couldn't even kill a single battery on the Ricoh. Some days I could, so I bought two and haven't needed another one since. IBIS is also something quite handy on this camera, due to the fact that it only has an f2.8 lens. It actually performs fantastically and allows you to get super sharp photos of still subjects at night at questionably low shutter speeds. ISO performance is also really good. I find myself shooting at 6400 ISO and have had no issues whatsoever. The last thing I want to talk about is actually the most important and amazing feature of this camera, and that is color science. Now, throughout my photographic journey, I have drastically overlooked color science because I too was in the same boat, that if you shoot RAW, then color science doesn't matter much. I have learned over the years for that statement to be incredibly incorrect, at least for me. How a camera sees the world is by default its personality, and you may try to alter its personality all you want in the digital darkroom, but its traits will still remain. Therefore, finding a camera that has a certain je ne sais quoi that matches your photographic vision, I think is incredibly important, and the Ricoh to me does just that. The colors that come from this photo continue to wow me, and with a little bit of coaxing I can attain that dreamy look that I'm always after in my photos. It's really hard to describe it, but it's true. Out of all the endless Sony, Fuji, Canon bodies I've tried and owned, the results I get from the Ricoh are by far my favorite. Anyways, that's my take on the Ricoh GR3X as a travel camera. I wanted to talk about it more from a practical sense than a clinical one, so I hope you got something out of it. Subscribe to the channel if you think I deserved it, and please stop watching YouTube videos, go outside, get some fresh air, and take some photos. See you later.